The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And good morning. Your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Victory Monday, February 23rd. Your readers today are
Ted Pijacki.
And I'm Ed Howard, and we'll start with the weather. It says cloudy and breezy with a little snow and a little or no accumulation today, but untreated surfaces will be slippery. The high today will be 31 degrees. Colder tonight with intermittent snow and flurries, accumulating about to an inch. The low will be 10 degrees. Winter is back. Colder tomorrow, and again with a bit of snow. Our normal high and low temperatures for this date are 35 and 21 degrees. The record high is 66, set back in 1930, and the record low is -3 in 1885. Our precipitation year-to-date, we've had 4.3 inches of precipitation. Normally by this time, we'd had 5.3, so we're about an inch behind. And the air quality index for today is good.
And from our front page today, we have an article about the pandemic. Recent pleas push number of pandemic fraud convictions past a dozen. Potentially now a second wave. When jury selection imminent, Brittany Herbert pleaded guilty last week to 2 fraud charges, becoming the 13th person to admit in U.S. District Court in Buffalo to defrauding a pandemic aid program. Federal guidelines suggest a prison term of 3 to 4 years for Herbert, who's 39 years old, of Brandywine, Maryland, when she is sentenced in June. Her plea came 2 weeks after her co-defendant, Brandy Williams, 45, of Dallas, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire and bank fraud. And it comes ahead of a scheduled sentencing next month in another case that could bring the longest prison term of any pandemic fraud defendant sentenced in Buffalo, that is Amanda Gloria, who is 48, of Altus, Oklahoma, who has admitted to conspiring with others to submit at least 153 fraudulent Paycheck Protection Program applications, seeking $43.8 million on behalf of at least 111 entities. Guidelines recommend a range of 15 years to nearly 20 years in prison for Gloria. Her sentencing has been postponed 10 times since her April 2022 guilty plea. But U.S. District Court Judge Richard J. Arcara, who inherited Gloria's case in November, said he will not allow any more adjournments and set her sentencing for March 19th. 10 of the 13 pandemic fraud defendants whose convictions were secured by the U.S. Attorney's Office are Western New York residents, and they accounted for nearly $6.7 million worth of COVID-19 fraud, according to the Buffalo News review of the cases. John Hutchins, who is 72, who is the former owner of the Rapids Theater in Niagara Falls, and Roberto Solomon, who is 43, the chief financial officer for the since-closed venue, are the most recent defendants to be sentenced to prison. They defrauded COVID-19 relief programs out of more than $1.8 million. U.S. District Judge Meredith Vaca sentenced Hutchins to 14 months and Solomon to 20 months on their pleas to conspiracy to commit bank fraud and wire fraud. The federal government dispersed COVID-19 economic injury disaster loan and Paycheck Protection program funds to help small businesses and entrepreneurs who were adversely affected by the public health crisis. But of the $1.2 trillion dispersed nationwide, more than $200 billion went to potentially fraudulent applicants, according to the Small Business Administration's Inspector General. The U.S. Justice Department's fraud section has prosecuted more than 200 defendants in more than 130 criminal cases across the nation, seizing more than $78 million in cash derived from fraudulently obtained PPP funds, as well as real estate and luxury items that were purchased with these illicit proceeds. The dollar amounts do not surprise DiGiacomo. What I have seen in my years in office is any time a program like this becomes available and the federal government puts money out, soon as that happens, you will always find a group of fraudsters who will come out, DiGiacomo said. They will try to get as much as they can. Am I surprised by the numbers? Not in the least. A pandemic fraud conviction has severe consequences, even for those who do not face a decade in prison. Sentencing guidelines suggest a prison term of 33 to 51 months for Nina Williams, 57, of Baltimore. The judge in her case recently appointed a different court-provided defense attorney to represent her, adjourned her sentencing, and scheduled a hearing for next week. When I first found out I was going to be charged in this case, I did not have any idea of how serious the situation was, she said in a November letter to the court. I thought I would just have to give the money that I received back. This whole ordeal has been the worst time of my life. Beyond being humiliated and shunned by former colleagues, I just feel like I'm having an out-of-body experience, watching someone I don't even recognize go to court and talk about going to federal prison. She cried in court when she pleaded guilty to her COVID-19 fraud offense in September of 2024, because the realization hit me that this was going to have lifelong consequences for me. She calls herself unemployable. Background checks since her arrest are flagged for fraud, she said. The bank accounts for her business have been closed, and she hasn't been able to open any new ones. She needs just 6 more academic credits to become a licensed practical nurse, but she worries that her felony conviction will prevent her from working as a nurse.
Well, staying on the front page of today's Buffalo News, our next headline is, "To take the Golden Snowball, Buffalo needs to up its game." Buffalo lags in the Golden Snowball Winter Contest, where winning isn't really winning at all. There are dynasties in sports that have spanned the decades: UConn in women's college basketball, the Montreal Canadiens in hockey, the New York Yankees in baseball. Then there's Syracuse in the Golden Snowball Contest. Winter after winter, the Salt City usually triumphed in the competition for the most snow among the 5 large upstate New York cities, including Buffalo. Syracuse went through a recent dry spell, however, failing to win for 6 straight winters before landing back on top last year, and they're well on track for a repeat performance this winter, according to the official statistics tracked by Patrick DeCourcy. As of Wednesday, Syracuse had received 128 inches of snow this winter, about 33 inches more than its average for this point in the season. Rochester was in second place for the Golden Snowball with 101 inches, or 29 inches above the average as of that day, and Buffalo was trailing with 82 inches, or 9 inches above average. Binghamton at 59 inches and Albany at 47 inches are well behind. Buffalo's third-place position may surprise those of us who lived through our bitter cold start to 2026, when snow piles lingered for weeks. But we haven't had as many of the punishing lake effect storms that hit the region in previous years as when Buffalo won the Golden Snowball 3 straight winters from 2021-22 to 2023-24, said John Hitchcock, a National Weather Service meteorologist based in Buffalo. Rochester and Syracuse, on the other hand, are experiencing more storm patterns that pick up moisture while passing over Lake Ontario. That's why Rochester and Syracuse have more snow than us, Hitchcock said. They've both had heavier lake effect snow events and more frequent lake effect snow off of Lake Ontario with that wind direction. We're well ahead of where we were last winter as of mid-February, 68 inches, and we're on pace to surpass the typical snowfall for winter in Buffalo, about 95 inches. But Syracuse's 128 inches to date already match its average for a full winter, with the rest of February and March to go, DeCourcy reports. Buffalo tends to get big lake effect snow events early in the winter, whereas Rochester and Syracuse tend to get their bigger events later in the winter, Hitchcock said. Lake Ontario doesn't freeze like Lake Erie, so they can get lake effect snow through the entire winter. Buffalo had won 4 of the past 7 Golden Snowball contests, including when it received 134 inches during the punishing 2022-23 winter. Still, Buffalo hasn't warmed up to the Golden Snowball to the same degree as our rivals down the Thruway. Former Mayor Byron Brown famously turned down an opportunity to accept the Golden Snowball trophy after Buffalo won the award following the 2018-19 winter, telling the Buffalo News he didn't want to celebrate heavy snowfall. Attitudes may be changing here, however. A local beer maker, John Domrus Jr. of Buffalo Brewing Company, brewed a Golden Snow beer in 2023 that nodded to our success in the contest. But Buffalo doesn't have anything on Syracuse, where the Golden Snowball is almost a birthright. The city won 25 of the 30 contests held between 1986 and 2016, DeCourcy's records show. And Syracuse is well ahead in the races for the Golden Snowball and the Golden Snow Globe this winter. The latter expands the competition to include all cities with 100,000 or more residents in the United States, and both contests run through June 30th. The Snow Globe contest has Syracuse at number 1, Rochester in 2nd, and South Bend, Indiana in 3rd at 82 inches, just 0.3 of an inch ahead of Buffalo at 4th. Syracuse's new snow totals are now 128 inches. Their normal season snow is 128 inches. DeCourcy wrote excitedly on Facebook on Wednesday, using the shorthand of WTG for "Way to go."
That's a trophy I don't mind not winning.
No, we don't need that.
Though it is snowing out there nicely as we look out the window.
Great.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 13 minutes after the hour. And we turn now to the opinion pages. And we start with the Buffalo News editorial for today, and the title is simply called Bias Confirmed. And the subtitle is Steps Must Be Taken to Address Persistent Inequity in Buffalo's School Suspensions. The injustice is real. An investigation by New York State Attorney General's office into Buffalo Public Schools disciplinary practices has verified again the inequities that have long existed when it comes to suspensions. Black and Latino students have been victims of this broken and biased system. Assessments of the years between 2020 and 2025 by the Attorney General's office show that black students were in some cases 6 times more likely to be suspended than white students, while Latino students were suspended 4 times as often as white students. Same for students with disabilities. As reported by the Buffalo News' Ben Sugimoto, these students were often sent home early without formal suspension, another piece of inequity. Just as bad, the same happened to English language learners who often lacked learning services to fully communicate their disciplinary action. These practices have long-term emotional effects on children. Indeed, this broken system has been breaking some students. The harm tends to start in an early age, too, when young children can hardly process what is happening. The suspension policy has been a decades-long issue in Buffalo Public Schools. A 5-year investigation by the Attorney General's office highlighted the problem and demanded steps. Letitia James announced a settlement that requires Buffalo schools to hire an independent monitor for 4 years to ensure the 58-page agreement is enforced. And there's more. Buffalo must also hire a district ombudsman person as a point of contact for students, families, and staff to help ensure discipline policies are applied fairly and consistently. Each of the district's 60 schools also will have to name a student behavior coordinator to work with the ombudsman person to enforce the settlement and civil rights laws. A local anti-suspension coalition, Solutions Not Suspensions, welcomed the news. They have been active since Dwan Daniels, a high school student at Lafayette, was suspended in 2010 for wandering the halls. Shortly after leaving the building, Daniels was shot and killed at a bus stop. What happened to Daniels sent shockwaves throughout the community. The coalition is justified in calling for the district to adopt more restorative practices to keep students in school and disrupt what they call the school-to-prison pipeline. Advocates Jessica Bauer Walker and Samuel Radford III have been leaders in the anti-suspension movement, along with the Western New York Law Center, the New York Civil Liberties Union, the University of Buffalo School of Law, CONECT, and Western New York Educational Equity Task Force, district parent groups, and the Erie County Restorative Justice Coalition, among others. The school district has taken steps, including last year's revision of suspension policies to reduce suspensions of pre-kindergarten through third grade students. The announcement of that effort was met with mixed opinions from the advocacy community. Buffalo made some progress in revamping its code of conduct, and small improvements in its suspension rates are shown in its data dashboard, but advocates have long been skeptical about the accuracy of the district's metrics. The Attorney General's report took notice, too, indicating several instances where due process protections were violated and urged the district to provide more accurate calculations of its discipline rates. This renewed focus by the Attorney General's office should be the catalyst the district needs to ensure equity in disciplinary practices. Enough children have been harmed by a biased system.
Well, today's Another Voice column deals with disabilities, and the writers are Max and Joyce Donatelli, who are longtime advocates for people living with disabilities, and their headline is, Early Intervention Needs to be Better Funded. There is another opportunity for Governor Kathy Hochul to do the right thing this fiscal year. She needs to fund critical early intervention and preschool funding. Young children from birth to 5 who experience any number of challenges, including developmental disabilities, need the support of a variety of professionals to help them with early learning gaps, speech needs, behavioral support needs, and a host of other issues as they prepare for school and future life. Their families need this help too, so they can better understand their children's challenges and how to best help them as they develop. Currently, options are limited. Many professionals are leaving the field and fewer agencies are offering these critical services. These windows of learning are open only for so long, and not getting them creates many other difficulties as children enter school. Preparation is necessary. We were fortunate when our son Craig, who was born with Down syndrome, was able to access early intervention and preschool supports when he needed them most, only weeks after he was born. We got in-home support from an early childhood specialist, then help with occupational, speech, and physical therapists, and other help in a toddler program. It all came from Heritage Centers, now the ARC Erie County, New York. As parents, we learned how to best help him prepare for school and understand how important it was to set high expectations for him and to see that he could best benefit from inclusion into regular classes with supports. All this helped us to get over our worries about Craig's potential and help prepare us to fight for his rightful place in school and society. We urge Governor Hochul to assure this year's New York State budget includes adequate funding for early intervention for young children that need it, so they can benefit the way Craig did many years ago. Today, Craig lives semi-independently and is now working at Explorin' More Children's Museum. He is a contributing member of society, living a fulfilling life. Without the critical support we got in his early years, we don't believe he would have the confidence, social skills, and self-esteem he has today. Early intervention works.
Today's editorial cartoon comes to us from Al Goodwin of the Creators Syndicate. And what we see are the heads of two people. The one on the left is an older person with a round face, gray hair, and above that person it says 1994 Big Tobacco. On the right side is a younger, thinner-faced person, and above that person it says 2026 Big Tech. And in between is a voice box where they are both saying the same thing. So what we have here is what Big Tobacco was saying in 1994 is being echoed by Big Tech in 2026. And they're both saying this: we don't design our product to be addictive. It's just a personal choice by users. If people like the experience, they keep using it. Our priority is the safety of our product. Health impact evidence is inconclusive.
Okay.
Heard that story before, haven't we?
Yes, we have. Now we'll turn to the political columns here, and the first one comes from Jackie Calms, and her headline is, "Former Presidents, Please Speak Out Against Trump." She writes, "Where are the statesmen when the state is under siege by the current head of state?" I've been mulling that question hardly for the first time, but on 3 occasions in the last few days. Last Monday, the federal holiday celebrating George Washington's birth, former President George W. Bush posted an essay on the first U.S. president as part of a civic project commemorating the country's 250th year. Simply by hailing Washington for traits that Donald Trump utterly lacks: humility, integrity, dignity, self-restraint, willingness to forfeit power, the piece was widely read as a sneak attack on the current president. Bush never named Trump. He thus maintained his years-long stupefying silence about the man who's trashed him, his family, his party, his legacy, and most of all, his country. As Jonathan V. Last wrote for the right-of-center anti-Trump bulwark, if Bush's words were a veiled attack on Trump, quote, "the veil is so powerful that even light can't escape it," close quote. Bush's essay came 2 days after former President Barack Obama finally responded to Trump's week-old racist post that caricatured the first black president and his wife as apes, thereby mainlining into the body politic one of the most toxic tropes against black Americans. Asked about it in a podcast interview, Obama called Trump's behavior, quote, deeply troubling, and said, quote, there doesn't seem to be any shame about this among people who used to feel like you had to have some sort of decorum and a sense of propriety and respect for the office. But like Bush, he never named Trump, and it's not even clear that Obama was referring to him. Then there was the third trigger for my musings about America's MIA statesman. On February 13th, the head of the holiday honoring Washington, Trump yet again violated Washington's precedent. At Fort Bragg in North Carolina, he essentially pushed uniformed young troops to violate the military's code, enshrining Washington's legacy of nonpartisanship. Trump treated them like props at a MAGA rally, lauding Republican candidates and office holders on hand, mocking past presidents, and urging the troops to vote Republican in November. This is unprecedented except by Trump himself. In November, he prodded sailors at Norfolk, Virginia to boo Barack Hussein Obama. In September, he told commanders summoned from around the world that the fight is here at home, a, quote, war from within, unquote, American cities. In June, also at Fort Bragg, Trump damned Democrats and sold MAGA merchandise over Army objections. There's a darn good reason for the wall that Washington built between the military and civilian government. As the Army Field Manual instructs troops, nonpartisanship assures the public that our Army will always serve the Constitution and our people loyally and responsibly, not just Republicans and not just Trump. But as multiple officers told the website military.com, quote, holding troops to account when goaded by the president, who is ultimately the boss, would be impossible. It's past time for Democrats Joe Biden, Obama, and Bill Clinton, and Republican Bush to come together to publicly demand that Trump honor the oath of office that each man took, and to school the electorate on the many ways in which he's dishonoring it, including by continuing to justify his refusal to peacefully transfer power in 2021. But each man is so observant of the norm that former presidents should not publicly criticize the incumbent one, again a precedent from George Washington, that they self-muzzle. This is Americans' quandary in these Trump times. Presidents and high-ranking veterans who could speak truth to power are so constrained by their devotion to norms and traditions that they won't confront a president who's daily shattering norms, traditions, and laws that form the foundation of this democratic nation.
Our next opinion piece comes to us from Ken Silverstein, and the headline is, When Electricity Becomes a Weapon of War Against Civilians. It's tempting to dismiss peace talks between Russia and Ukraine when missiles and drones continue targeting power plants, leaving people to freeze with no lights. This is the reality in Ukraine today. Over a recent weekend, Russia launched dozens of missiles and hundreds of drones, many aimed not at military positions, but the energy infrastructure, power stations, substations, transmission lines, and the workers who repair them. The intent is clear: turn electricity into a weapon and civilian life into the pressure point. Maxim Timchenko, the CEO of DTEK, Ukraine's largest private energy company, underscored that point in an interview. War has taken a toll on his country's power plants. Crews work day and night to repair the damage, and often at personal risk. What I see every day is not fear, but determination, Timchenko said. People go back to work after sleepless nights filled with attacks, working in freezing temperatures and under the risk of further strikes. And yet, every day they return. Electricity has become one of the central battlegrounds of modern war. Disrupt power and hospitals falter, water systems fail, and communications go dark. Daily life grinds to a halt. The suffering is immediate and borne almost entirely by civilians. Russia has been refining this approach for years. Long before missiles routinely smashed transformers and turbines, Russian hackers infiltrated Ukraine's power grid in 2015 and 16, briefly cutting off electricity to hundreds of thousands of people. Those cyber attacks were covert and experimental, meant to test vulnerabilities without escalating the conflict. Now, that caution is gone. Cyber sabotage has shifted to open destruction via airstrikes. Winter has become a force multiplier. Today's strikes are aimed to cold snaps, turning outages into humanitarian crises. In this sense, Ukraine is not just fighting an invasion, it's enduring a campaign designed to make life unbearable. Whether Ukraine can keep the lights on increasingly depends on what it can stop in the sky. Air defense systems don't just protect military targets, they shield power plants, substations, and the crews who rush to repair them. When interceptors run short, more missiles get through and blackouts last longer. Delays in U.S. weapon deliveries translate into colder homes, darker hospitals, and longer disruptions.
Well, turning now to some international news, our headline is U.S.-China trade relations face new uncertainty after justice's ruling. The Supreme Court decision striking down President Trump's sweeping tariffs has added a wrinkle to an already complicated U.S.-China relationship, with both countries navigating shifting ground to avoid an all-out trade war that would disrupt the global economy while still jostling for a position of strength in the negotiations. Friday's court ruling would seem to strengthen China's hand, but analysts predict that Beijing will be cautious in exploiting the advantage, knowing that Trump has other ways of levying taxes. Both sides also want to maintain a fragile trade truce and stabilize ties ahead of Trump's highly anticipated trip to Beijing. It will give China a moral boost in their negotiations with Trump's team ahead of the summit, but they're prepared for the scenario that nothing actually changes in reality, said Sun Yun, director of China's program at the Stimson Center, a Washington-based think tank. Furious about the defeat, Trump said he was imposing a temporary 10% global tariff before raising it to 15%, as well as pursuing alternative paths for import duties. He made the case for tariffs by pointing to China, which poses the biggest challenge to the U.S. economic, technological, and military dominance. China had hundreds of billions of dollars in surpluses with the United States. He said, "They rebuilt China, they rebuilt the army. We built China's army by allowing that to happen," Trump said on Friday. "I have a great relationship with President Xi, but he respects our country now." The White House has confirmed that Trump will travel to China on March 31st through April 2nd to meet with President Xi Jinping. Xi is unlikely to flaunt or brandish the Supreme Court ruling forcefully when meeting with Trump, likely choosing instead to try to strengthen his rapport with the U.S. president, said Ali Wynn, senior research and advocacy advisor focused on U.S. policy towards China at the International Crisis Group. The more Xi can do that, the more likely it is that fragile trade truce between the United States and China will take hold in earnest, and that Trump will be amenable to security concessions that give China greater freedom of maneuver in Asia, Wynn said.
In world news, we have this headline: British royals tangled in their worst crisis in generations. King Charles III's brother was under arrest. Police were searching 2 royal properties, and news commentators were endlessly discussing the details of a sex scandal with tentacles that stretched to the gates of Buckingham Palace. So, how did Britain's royal family spend Thursday afternoon? The king sat in front row of the first day of the London Fashion Week. Queen Camilla attended a lunchtime concert, and Princess Anne visited a prison. The decision to continue normal royal duties was more than just an example of British stoicism in the face of a monarchy's biggest crisis in almost a century. It was the opening act of the House of Windsor's fight for survival as the arrest of former Prince Andrew threatens to undermine public backing for the monarchy. After pledging the support of the police investigation into his brother's friendship with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, the king stressed his intentions. And here's a quote from him. "My family and I will continue in our duty and service to all of you." Charles R., using the abbreviation for Rex, the Latin word for king. The simple fact that Charles made the statement showed the scale of the problem created by the arrest of the king's 66-year-old sibling, now known as Andrew Montalban Windsor, who was held for 11 hours and then released under investigation, meaning he was neither charged nor exonerated. The event was so unprecedented that commentators had to reach back to the 1640s and arrest and execution of King Charles I during the English Civil War to find parallel. Montalban Windsor's arrest on suspicion of misconduct in public office is shaping up to be the monarchy's biggest crisis since Edward VIII abdicated in 1936 to marry an American divorcee, Wallis Simpson. That scandal weakened public support for the monarchy, which did not fully recover for 15 years. The turnaround came only after Edward's successor, King George VI, refused to flee Britain during World War II, demonstrating his solidarity with a nation ravaged by Nazi bombs. Even before she ascended the throne, Queen Elizabeth II followed her father's lead and publicly pledged her life in service to Britain. But while the impact of Edward's abdication lingered for years, the crisis reached a crescendo in a few days. And the resolution in that case was relatively simple. Edward stepped aside and his oldest brother took his place. By contrast, the drama surrounding Montalban Windsor is ongoing, with no end in sight. Moving forward means facing uncomfortable questions about what the institution and the family members themselves may have known about Montalban Windsor's activities. The palace has sought to draw a bold line separating the former prince and the rest of the monarchy by stripping him of his titles, including the right to be called a prince. In another blow to the former prince, the British government is considering formally removing him from the line of succession to the crown. Despite losing his status and honors, Andrew still remains eighth in line to the throne, and that can only be changed with legislation. Charles is the first monarch that has to meet our expectations of figures in public life, which is to be accountable and to explain yourself, said Craig Prescott, a royal expert at Royal Holloway University in London. And you always have to work to earn the support of the public. That is a particular challenge when you're facing a controversy such as Andrew Montalban Windsor. Critics argue that the monarchy was slow to respond to the pressure, given that Montalban Windsor's leaks to Epstein have been discussed for more than a decade. The best outcome for the monarchy is for the police investigation to focus solely on the information in the Epstein files and how that relates to Montalban Windsor, said Peter Hunt, a former BBC royal correspondent. The worst outcome would be if police expand their inquiries to what the broader institution might have known and when. Were questions raised about his behavior as a trade envoy over those 10 years? Were they answered? What did people do about them? Hunt said on the BBC. And perhaps there's more to learn. Will there be files? He asked.
Well, next we have environmental news, and the headline here is Changes for Climate, How Small Personal Choices Can Add Up to Big Emissions Cuts. Climate change is often viewed as an issue that's too big for individual action to matter, but when personal choices add up, the impact can be significant. The Associated Press looked at 4 everyday behaviors and then posed the question, what if just 1 in 10 Americans who eat beef, drive gasoline cars, heat their homes with natural gas, or buy new clothes, changed those habits? AP gathered data from federal agencies and other sources on each habit, then calculated how much emissions would be reduced if 1 out of every 10 users made a switch. The answer is tens and in some cases hundreds of billions of pounds of carbon pollution avoided each year. Beef is one of the most carbon-intensive foods in the global food system because cattle emit methane and require vast amounts of land and feed, creating large amounts of pollution. Producing beef generates greenhouse gases several times higher than a chicken. The recommended serving size of meat in the U.S. is 3 ounces, according to the American Heart Association, and swapping 1 serving of beef of that size for chicken once a week would cut about 10 pounds of carbon dioxide. Over 52 weeks in a year, that would equal a reduction of 525 pounds of carbon dioxide per year. About 74% of Americans eat beef at least once a week, according to a survey. If 1 out of every 10 of them, or about 25 million people, swapped just 1 beef meal a week for a chicken, emissions would fall by about 13 billion pounds of carbon dioxide each year. That change is comparable to the annual emissions of almost 1.3 million gasoline cars. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, transportation is one of the largest sources of direct greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S., and personal vehicles account for a major share. Transportation accounts for 28% of total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions by economic sector. The EPA says that the average motorist drives 11,500 miles a year. The average gas-powered car emits 14 ounces of carbon dioxide per mile, compared with about 3.9 ounces of carbon dioxide per mile for an electric vehicle. Driving an electric vehicle instead of a gas car cuts about 7,400 pounds of carbon dioxide per person annually, even after accounting for emissions from electricity generation. If 1 in 10 licensed U.S. drivers, or 23.77 million people, made that switch, the emission saving would add up to about 175 billion pounds of carbon dioxide every year, nearly 1.25% of U.S. total greenhouse gas emissions. If a large percentage of people changed a little bit of their travel, then all of a sudden the benefits are huge, said Dylan Fitch-Pelos, a professional researcher and co-director of Bicycling Plus Research Collaborative. About 60 million U.S. households rely on utility natural gas furnaces, according to the U.S. Census. Replacing a gas furnace with an electric heat pump, which moves heat instead of generating it, cuts about 1,830 pounds of carbon dioxide per household per year. If 1 in 10 households that heat their home with natural gas switch to electric heat pumps, the result would be about 11 billion pounds of carbon dioxide avoided annually, comparable to taking 1 million cars off the road. And finally, apparel has a significant carbon footprint. A life cycle assessment by Levi Strauss & Company estimates that producing a single pair of Levi's 501 jeans can emit more than 44 pounds of carbon dioxide. If 34.2 million people, the equivalent of 1 in 10 Americans, bought a pair of second-hand jeans this year instead of new ones, it would avoid about 1.5 billion pounds of carbon dioxide emissions, equivalent to the emissions of about 150,000 gasoline cars.
Wow. In financial news, ruling about tariffs takes away Trump's edge on negotiating. With the stroke of a pen, the Supreme Court wreaked havoc on President Trump's favorite method of wielding leverage over other countries. The justice's landmark ruling on Friday, striking down the administration's global tariffs, marks a significant blow to the president, who relishes exerting unilateral power to achieve his goals, something he did virtually unchecked during his first year in office. Trump quickly announced plans to reimpose the duties, but the other means available to him are far less nimble. It's one of the most important moments of the presidency so far, said Josh Lipsky, who leads international economic work at the Atlantic Council, a Washington think tank. Tariffs imposed under an emergency powers law have been the primary economic weapon the president has leveraged to remake the global trading system. The question now, Lipsky said, is, can you rebuild it in aggregate? As the White House regroups, the ruling has immediate implications for Trump's planned meeting with his counterpart, Xi Jinping, in China, in which the two were expected to extend a tariff truce reached last year. Beijing will come into the discussion with a strengthened hand and could make Trump's expected demands for large purchases of American goods, Boeing aircraft, and energy exports a tougher sell. Wilbur Ross, who served as Trump's Commerce Secretary during his first term, says the president's alternatives all contain drawbacks that limit the scope of his powers. What all of them will do is give him less negotiating power with all these countries, especially with China, Ross said. It also raises the stakes for Tuesday night's State of the Union address, which the president has already said would tout his economic agenda. Trump may be forced to recalibrate his message now that his signature policy has been thrust into chaos. Fearful of having his power clipped, Trump has spent months openly begging the court to keep the levies in place, declaring that the president has to be able to wheel and deal with tariffs. He has credited the tariffs, or the threat of them, for pressuring foreign leaders to the negotiating table with the threat of being able to rectify imbalances and even stop armed conflicts. But the court, which is controlled by a conservative majority, including 3 justices that Trump appointed to the bench, did not bow to his entreaties. The message from the majority opinion was clear, and here's a quote from the Supreme Court. The framers gave Congress alone the power to impose tariffs during peacetime, and the foreign affairs implications of tariffs do not make it any more likely that Congress would relinquish its tariff power through vague language or without careful limits. The blow comes amid a perilous stretch for the White House, with Trump facing criticism over his threats to acquire Greenland, violent actions by immigration officers, and fallout from the Jeffrey Epstein files.
As part of our newspaper reading, we now present the day's death listings. If you need further information on any of these names, call us at 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555. And we have 2 local listings. First, Cheryl Denise Chambers, nee Samacaro, passed away on February 14th. She was from Buffalo, but a resident of California now, and services will be held for her there on March 14th. And John Sullivan passed away on February 18th, and services for him will be held on a funeral mass on Wednesday, February 25th at 11 a.m. at St. Michael's Roman Catholic Church in Fort Erie. And also we note the passing of Bill Mazeroski. He was 89 years old. He hit the historic walk-off home run in Game 7 of the 1960 World Series. And Ted, I'll tell you, I was a 10-year-old Yankee fan then. And when I found out about that, I went out and kicked a flower pot, which broke, and my mother sent me to my room.
I remember that well.
Yeah. So if you need further information on any of these names, please give us a call on 716-821-5555. That's 716-821-5555.
And we turn now to our royal stars for our horoscopes of the day. If today is your birthday, Monday, February 23rd, you are practical, determined, and tenacious. You have analytical abilities and project confidence. Now, the stars will tell us what kind of day you're going to have. 5 dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, 2 so-so, 1 difficult. So, Aries, 3 stars. Keep an eye on your money and possessions today because something unexpected could impact them. Protect what you own against loss, theft, or damage. Tonight, lively conversations. Taurus, 4 stars. This is an erratic day because the moon is in your sign, lined up with wild, wacky Uranus, making today impulsive and wonderfully spontaneous. Tonight, check your money and possessions. Gemini, 4 stars. Steer clear of controversial subjects. Nevertheless, you're keen to explore new ideas on new subjects and see new places in order to learn new things. Tonight, you win. Cancer, 4 stars. A friend might surprise you by saying or doing something you least expect. Steer clear of disputes about inheritance, shared property, and shared expenses. Tonight, enjoy privacy. I've been watching too many British novels. Privacy. Leo, 3 stars. Tread carefully when dealing with authority figures today because something unexpected might catch you off guard. Something might do or say something you didn't anticipate. Tonight, be friendly. Virgo, 4 stars. Travel plans might change today. They might be delayed or canceled, or perhaps you'll suddenly have to travel when you didn't expect to do so. Tonight, you're noticed. Libra, 3 stars. An unexpected dispute with your kids might occur today, especially about money or financial support. Don't let a partner, spouse, or close friend put you down or make you feel diminished. Tonight, explore and learn. Scorpio, 4 stars. This is a busy, playful day, even though friction at home might occur. Give yourself extra time so you have wiggle room to deal with the unexpected. Tonight, check your finances. Sagittarius, 3 stars. Pay attention to everything you say and do today because this is a mildly accident-prone day. Be alert. Tonight, be attentive and listen. Capricorn, 4 stars. Disputes about money or shared expenses for a social occasion, a vacation, or something to do with education and support of your kids might arise today. Don't overreact. Tonight, work. Aquarius, 4 stars. Your home routine might be interrupted today. Small appliances could break down or a little breakage could occur. Tonight, relax. And finally, Pisces, 3 stars. Transportation delays are likely. Avoid arguments today. Keep smiling. Tonight, cocoon at home. I'm not a Pisces, but I had transportation delays on my way to the studio today. Over to you, Ed.
Well, looking back on this date in history, on this date in 1836, the siege of the Alamo by Mexican troops began in San Antonio, Texas. Almost all of the nearly 200 Texas defenders, including American frontiersman and politician Davy Crockett, were killed in the 13-day assault. In 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt signed an agreement with Cuba to lease land around Guantanamo Bay to the United States. No date was set for termination of the lease, and the naval station Guantanamo Bay continues at the site, along with a detention complex for suspected terrorists. In 1942, the first shelling of the U.S. mainland during World War II occurred as a Japanese submarine fired on an oil refinery near Santa Barbara, California. In 1945, during World War II, U.S. Marines on Iwo Jima captured Mount Suribachi, where they raised 2 American flags. In 1980, American Eric Heiden completed his sweep of the 5 men's speed skating events at the Winter Olympic Games in Lake Placid, New York, and by winning the men's 10,000-meter race in world record time, Heiden became the first athlete to win 5 gold medals in a single Winter Olympics. And in 2011, in a major policy reversal, President Barack Obama's administration said it would no longer defend the constitutionality of the Defense of Marriage Act, a federal law banning recognition of same-sex marriage.
Okay, we're going to have a little message here from Heloise because it applies to us here in the studio. I'm just going to let you know, we read what the paper says. We don't make up these articles. And Heloise headline says, using proper American English. Woohoo! What has happened to the proper grammar usage and the proper pronunciation of American English? Gonna and wanna have replaced going to and want to. People use different than instead of different from. Words such as February, mischievous, veteran, and temperature are constantly mispronounced by TV journalists, weather reporters, and politicians. Unfortunately, we are judged by our vocabulary when we speak, which makes people form instant impressions about our education, social status, and intelligence. Many thanks for all your wonderful hints. And it's signed Lori H. And Heloise responds, Lori, I don't know if proper grammar is still taught in school. It disturbs me, too, when I hear someone say, I'd have went, rather than I'd have gone. People have lost promotions and jobs because of improper English. As one CEO of a very large corporation once told me, our employees represent this company, and we could never hire someone who uses terrible English. We want polished individuals who put their best foot forward.
Well, Ted, you're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for February, not February, February 23rd on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and we'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ted Pajacki.
And I'm Ed Howard.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We will continue now with our reading of the articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And we turn now to local and city news. And our headline is, Ryan aims to hike residents' user fee for trash services. Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan's administration intends to raise the city user fee, the payment city residents make to pay for trash and recycling services. The fee was put in place in 1995 under Mayor Anthony Masiello, and it has never been popular. City lawmakers have said residents find increases to the user fee over the last 3 decades more unpopular than tax increases. But the Ryan administration says it must increase the fee after years of imbalance in the enterprise fund, the account that collects the user fee and pays for its services. The enterprise fund owes the city general fund more than $28 million, a debt the Ryan administration says it will repay over time through fee increases. The imbalance is a poor accounting practice that could draw criticism from the city controller's office and external auditors, city officials said, and likely violates the city charter. Here are a couple things to know about the upcoming increase in the city's refuge collection program. Jim Milroy, the budget director under Masiello when the user fee was introduced, recently described to the Buffalo News the extreme reaction from city residents when they put the fee in place, which was necessary to balance the books with the city at its constitutional taxing limit. North District Council member Joseph Golombek, the city's longest tenured member, directly benefited from the user fee in the campaign that got him into his seat in 1999, even though he told people he did not believe he could revoke it. Golombek credits the user fee with being a main issue in his campaign, despite sharing a position with his opponent and never bringing it up unless asked. He defeated sitting member Dale Zukoleski, who was there when the fee was instituted. Golombek said he never raised the issue to voters during the campaign, but he didn't have to. Residents would question and attack Zukoleski on the user fee unprompted, he said. I knew I didn't have to bring it up because people were angry about it, Golombek said. The Ryan administration says it has no choice but to bring the account back into balance and fix the mistakes of prior administrations, but that will likely come with some political pain. The user fee, while the only option for the Masiello administration at that time, did spread the cost more equitably across the user base. When the user fee was instituted, 39% of the total assessed value of property in the city was tax exempt. That number now sits at 27%, according to budget figures. While the city has failed to keep the fund in balance, the idea of the fund is a more fair way to pay garbage collection fees when it is self-sustaining, Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swanekamp said. Property owners who are tax exempt, such as religious institutions, schools, and nonprofits, receive refuse collection services from the city despite not paying into the tax base before the user fee was instituted. With the user fee in place, those property owners either pay for the city service or must contract with a private company. There are folks that live in different buildings that have their own garbage collection that do not use city services, Swanekamp said. So they're not paying the user fee. So it's actually a genuine benefit to the residents who are paying for it.
Well, 2 people have been identified in connection with vandalism at the Bills' new stadium. The investigation into who is responsible for the vulgar graffiti that caused $150,000 in damage at the new Bills stadium has resulted in the identification of 2 people. General contractor Gilbane Turner has conducted the investigation and set up a tip line in collaboration with the Erie County Sheriff's Office. The company has also offered a $100,000 reward for information that leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible. That effort has resulted in the identification of 2 people who may be responsible for the graffiti, according to a spokesperson from Gilbane Turner. The company said this remains an active investigation, so it is directing further inquiries to law enforcement. The Erie County Sheriff's Office said at this time no charges have been filed and the investigation is ongoing. The Gilbane Turner team has worked diligently to create a respectful and supportive environment on this project, Gilbane Turner said in a statement. We have made significant investment in job site amenities to support the trade workers performing demanding work, often in challenging weather conditions. They deserve a professional and respectful workplace. Construction workers returned to the stadium site Friday for the first time since the graffiti was found Monday morning that ruined permanent fixtures and finishes inside the building, most found in the luxury suites areas on the west side of the stadium. Upon returning to the job, all workers were called to a special meeting early in the morning where they were warned about the consequences for anyone who inflicts further damage to the property. Crude remarks were sprayed on granite countertops, tile, and flooring over the weekend. The 200-level suites were 90% done, but the porous finishes weren't sealed yet, so there was no way to salvage them. The damage is estimated at $150,000, officials said, which would likely need to be absorbed or covered by insurance for Gilbane Turner. Officials believed it was an inside job since the site is well secured and clearance is needed to get into the areas that were vandalized. No one can get past the entrance gates to the construction site without having their ID tag barcode scanned. The stadium project also has private security on site and some surveillance cameras positioned in different areas. Work has been going on nearly around the clock, with 3 shifts working 7 days a week as part of the push to complete the summer in time to host the first events this summer. But a smaller crew of around 300 workers was likely there when the vandalism occurred, and authorities have the list of everyone who worked then. As of December 31st, the stadium project was 85% complete, according to a third-party forensic analysis. There are nearly 1,500 workers on the job, and approximately 8,000 people have worked on this project to date, according to Gilbane Turner.
Also in local news, Common Council approves Erie Basin Marina contract with stipulations. The new operators for the Erie Basin Marina properties now have an agreement with the City of Buffalo in place, but some questions remain. The Common Council last week approved the agreement, but with conditions requiring the city to explore changing the terms of revenue collection from a percentage of net revenue to gross revenue, and that they enforce city rules around minority and women-owned business and enterprise contracting, commonly referred to as MWBE. Council members have asked specifically if we can change the 30% to come from gross versus net, City Majority Leader Leah Halton Pope said before casting her yes vote on approval, adding that the council wants consistent and thorough reporting on MWBE statistics from the operators. City officials have said that they will be able to enforce the MWBE standards and reporting without an issue. But the change in terms around revenue collection will not be possible, Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swanekamp said in a written statement to the Buffalo News. The city consulted with the operators on whether they could change the terms for payments to come out of gross revenue, but the operators said that would not allow for a financially viable business, he added. The city will move forward with the previously agreed upon contract, and we look forward to working with the new operator to deliver a better marina experience for slip tenants, Buffalo residents, and visitors enjoying our waterfront, the statement said. As written in the draft agreement, Marina Management Group LLC, the company led by John Nash, who has handled day-to-day operations at the marina for the last 4 years, would run the marina operations and restaurant spaces for 5 years, with the option for 2 5-year contract renewals. The company would pay 20% this year, 25% next year, and 30% in the third year and all years going forward into an escrow account that would be used for capital improvements at the city-owned spaces. The contract also includes a termination clause that would allow city officials to end the contract if they find the arrangement is not benefiting the city. But Halton Pope said she understood the conditions added during approval would mean that the city has to come back with new terms that address council members' concerns over using net revenue or a share of the profits instead of gross revenue, which would guarantee the city would be paid something each year. Under the previous agreement with former Smith Brothers operators, the city was paid 20% of net revenue above $80,000. Controller's office audits found that arrangement rarely produced any money for the city, with Smith Boys reporting in many years that they did not reach that threshold. Net is after everything else is paid for, which could be $0 and 0 cents, Halton Pope said. One audit found that over an 8-year period, Smith Brothers paid the city less than $1,000.
Well, in Buffalo news now, the Working Families Party is backing Rivera and Bojack for state posts. The state's Working Families Party on Thursday endorsed Assembly member Jonathan Rivera to represent the state's 61st Senate District, now occupied by Senator Jeremy Zellner, and backed Buffalo attorney Adam Bojack to succeed Rivera in the 149th Assembly District. Jasmine Gripper, the director of the Working Families Party, praised Rivera, a Buffalo Democrat elected to represent the 149th Assembly District in 2020, and Bojack, a family court and housing attorney who is a member of the Buffalo Democratic Socialists of America. Jonathan Rivera is a lifelong Buffalo resident whose career in public service has been rooted in his community and shaped by a deep commitment to serving Western New York, Gripper said in a statement. In the state assembly, he has consistently fought to advance housing, infrastructure, education, public health, and environmental protections that deliver real results for the people he represents. Rivera, a Buffalo Democrat, plans to challenge Zellner, a Democrat of Tonawanda, for the Democratic line in a June primary. He raised objections that Zellner, the chair of the Erie County Democratic Committee, won the party line and ultimately defeated Republican Dan Gagliardo in a special election on February 3rd by the choice of the county committee and not in a primary. Rivera, 39, who succeeded now Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan when Ryan moved from the Assembly to the Senate, now intends to succeed Ryan in the 61st Senate District, which is entirely in Erie County. It includes parts of Buffalo, the city and town of Tonawanda, Amherst, Grand Island, and the villages of Kenmore and Williamsville. Among active voters, the Senate district includes 1,164 Working Families Party members. It includes 93,422 Democrats, 50,267 Republicans, 3,772 Conservatives, and 56,595 voters who are in other parties or independent. Rivera's Assembly District includes parts of the cities of Buffalo and Lackawanna, the town and village of Hamburg, and the hamlet of Lakeview. In statements, Rivera and Bojack said they were proud to stand with the Working Families Party to represent Western New York and Albany. The Working Families Party has always been at the forefront of the fight for economic justice, strong unions, affordable housing, quality public education, and a government that puts working people ahead of powerful special interests, Rivera said. I am deeply honored to receive their endorsement, and their support means a great deal because it reflects a shared commitment to building an economy that works for everyone. In its endorsement of Bojack, Ripper noted that Bojack grew up in a working-class home in East Aurora and understands the pressures facing families today. He spent his career as an assigned counsel in family court while also providing free legal services for tenants and fighting for working families across New York who need a fair shot and someone who is willing to stand up for them, Ripper said.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service. The time is 15 minutes after the hour, and now we turn to the sports section. And as Ed announced earlier, today is Victory Monday, because the headline across the top of the page is USA's Golden Age, and golden is spelled GOAL-DEN. And underneath it says, overtime score gives Americans men's hockey team its first Olympic title since 1980. And there's a picture there of the man who scored the goal, Jack Hughes, very surrounded by reporters, very exuberant and joyous, flashing his missing tooth that was knocked out during the day. So let's see a little bit about this. The United States is on top of the hockey world for the first time in nearly a half century, and no miracle was needed. Jack Hughes scored less than 2 minutes into overtime, and the U.S. beat Canada 2-1 in the gold medal final at the Milan Cortina Olympics on Sunday, earning the nation's third men's title at the Games and its first since the Miracle on Ice in 1980, 46 years to the day of the upset over the mighty Soviet Union. Unlike the ragtag group of college kids that pulled off one of the biggest shockers in sports history at Lake Placid, the Americans in Milan were a machine that rode goaltender Connor Hellebuyck and a roster full of National Hockey League players through the tournament unbeaten. Still, they were underdogs once again against the stacked Canadians, and still came out on top again. This is all about our country right now, said Hughes, who lost at least one and maybe two of his front teeth, taking a high stick during the game. I love the USA. I love my teammates. It's unbelievable. The U.S. Hockey Brotherhood is so strong. Early in the 3-on-3 overtime, Zach Werenski took the puck away from Nathan MacKinnon and passed it to Hughes, who was wide open, streaking to the net. Hughes fired a shot past Jordan Binghamton 1 minute and 41 seconds in to send the players into a wild celebration as the rival Canadians watched from the bench. Asked his favorite moment during his Olympic debut, Captain Austin Matthews quipped, "I think it's when Jack scored. I'll definitely remember Jack's goal." There was a note of sadness amid all the joy, as Werenski and Matthew Tkachuk carried a Johnny Gaudreau number 13 jersey around the ice in tribute to the beloved player who was killed along with his brother in 2024. Gaudreau's parents, Guy and Jay, his widow Meredith, and their oldest children were in attendance. It was Johnny Jr.'s second birthday, and he was brought on the ice with his older sister, Noah, for the team photo. "We just want to show the Gaudreau family our support," Brady Tkachuk said, of a player known as Johnny Hockey. "He was so near and dear to us. We miss him dearly. We did it for him." Hellebuyck was extraordinary, stopping 41 of 42 shots he faced as Canada tilted the ice toward him over the final 2 periods. He made the save of the tournament by getting his stick on a puck that was shot from Devin Toews in the third period, then minutes later denied Macallan Calabrini on a breakaway, something he also did to Connor McDavid early. He was our best player by a mile. He's an absolute stud. He wants to be in those moments. He wants to make the saves. So he was definitely our MVP.
Well, the Olympics are over, so it must be time now to turn back again to some Bills news.
Yay!
And Lance Lasowski's column is headlined, Combine Gives Bills Chance to Choose Wisely. Finding the right edge rusher with the 26th pick may be a challenge for Bean and Company. After another batch of new defensive linemen failed to improve the Buffalo Bills' pass rush, General Manager and President of Football Operations Brandon Bean pinned the struggles of his pass rush on the absence of one player. We missed Ed Oliver, Bean told reporters last month. Oliver, the Bills' top defensive tackle, missed all but 3 regular season games because of injuries. In those games, he totaled 7 tackles for a loss and 3 sacks. 2 of Bean's draft picks, especially 4th-round selection of Deion Walker, helped Buffalo win without Oliver, but the Bills ranked 20th in sacks and 12th in next-gen stats pressure rate. They had 1 sack in 2 playoff games, and they haven't recorded more than 2 sacks in any playoff game since the wild card matchup with Miami in January of 2023. Bills coach Joe Brady's new defensive coordinator, Jim Lenhart, is going to implement a 3-4 scheme that's designed to stop the run and make quarterbacks uncomfortable. There will be different pressure looks and less predictability, with a focus on moving players around to create matchup problems. The Bills' pass rush was rarely effective in 2025, in part because too often they could not stop the run. On occasions when they limited explosive plays on the ground, the Bills were too easy to block because of the offense's protection plans could focus on edge rushers Greg Rousseau and Joey Bosa. Former head coach Sean McDermott had to rely too much on blitzing to create pressures, and more often than not, the extra rusher did not impact the pocket. Injuries impacted Bean's plan. Edge rushers Michael Hay and Landon Jackson were lost for the season. T.J. Sanders, the rookie defensive tackle Buffalo chose in the 2nd round, lost valuable reps because of an injury. Practice squad elevations were playing important snaps late in the regular season. Now, Buffalo's depth on edge is thin because Bosa and A.J. Epinesa are free agents. There are building blocks on the defensive line led by Rousseau, Oliver, and Walker. But can the Bills finally have the elite pass rusher they've coveted? Von Miller looked like one until he suffered a knee injury that derailed the plan. Bosa was too terrible against the run to be a candidate for 2026. Only one player, Leonard Floyd, had double-digit sacks, 10.5, in 2023 during McDermott's 9 seasons as coach. Each of the past 2 Super Bowl champions had ferocious defensive lines that performed at their best in the playoffs. Bean has mentioned multiple times in recent interviews that a team typically needs a high draft pick to land one of the NFL's best edge rushers. Some dominant ones have been selected high, most notably Myles Garrett and Chase Young, but recent history shows that a team does not need a top 15 selection to land someone who can get to the quarterback. Over the past 2 seasons, 28 players have recorded double-digit sacks. Their average draft position, 63rd overall, or a late 2nd-round pick. Cincinnati Bengals edge rusher Trey Hendrickson, a 3rd-round selection in 2017, led the NFL with 17.5 sacks in 2024. Though Rousseau has been an excellent run defender, he has yet to eclipse 8 sacks in 5 seasons since he was picked 30th overall. The Bills own the 26th pick in the NFL draft, which will preclude them from selecting David Bailey or Reuben Bain Jr., but they'll use the NFL scouting combine in Indianapolis to continue to evaluate this class of edge rushers.
Well, with the Olympics over, the National Hockey League Buffalo Sabres can return to their schedule as they will begin play again this Wednesday. And this article kind of is a segue between the Olympics and the returning Sabres. Its headline is, "Victory Captures the Hearts of the Sabres." The roar wasn't overwhelming at the Lecom Harbor Center, but it certainly resonated. Dozens of people surrounded a flat-screen television behind the south boards at Harbor Center, whooped and cheered as soon as Jack Hughes scored a game-winning goal for the United States in overtime in the men's Olympic gold medal game on Sunday in Milan. Among the small crowd that watched the final minutes of the United States 2-1 overtime win against Canada were several members of the Buffalo Sabres, the coaches with the goalies, and all of them standing on the ice. They watched as the U.S. won its first gold medal in men's hockey since 1980. The group of players standing on the ice watched intensely as the game went on. "Canada had such an incredible team," said Lyon, who is from Baudette, Minnesota. "But for us to go toe-to-toe with them, seemingly for the whole tournament, was pretty impressive." And the players watched teammate Tage Thompson, who helped the U.S. win the gold medal. "I'm so happy and proud for Tage," Sabres right winger Alex Tuch said. "He's been awesome over there, and he played really well today." They witnessed another step in the continued growth and success of the U.S. in hockey, long and traditionally considered Canada's game. "I would have loved to have been a part of it," said Tuch, who has represented the U.S. at the junior and professional levels in international competition. "I would have loved to have been over there. They brought in an incredible team. I know it means the world to all those guys, but it means the world to everybody that's represented the U.S., especially the guys before us that have come so close. You see all the time and effort those guys put in, the alumni and everything. It's really very, very special." The Sabres pushed back at the start of their scheduled 10:30 practice Sunday so that they could watch the title game and witness a historic chapter in U.S. hockey history. They watched as Hughes picked up that pass from Zach Werenski and fired that shot past Canadian goalie Jordan Bennington. Many of them were in the locker room at the KeyBank Center, waiting to put portable rollers on their skates and rush over to Harbor Center's rink as soon as the game was over. "It was a little bit of a shock," Tuch said. "It was a crazy game. You see that puck go in, and then we had to run over to practice. But it was awesome. The U.S. win was really special." Only a few things got the final say. The Sabres have only 11 U.S.-born players on their roster, including Tuch, who's from Baldwinsville, and defenseman Matthias Samuelsson, who's from Philadelphia. There were a lot more Canadians in the room for sure, but it's fun to chirp each other while watching the game, Samuelsson said. Samuelsson took note of the long faces on many of his Canadian teammates. So did Tuch. "We were outnumbered in there, but we got the last laugh, and that was nice," Tuch said. He quickly corrected himself. "That was awesome." Hughes' goal will go into the annals of heralded U.S. hockey plays, including T.J. Oshie's shootout goal in the 2014 against Russia, and Thompson's overtime goal to win the IIHF World Championship in May. But Sabres coach Lindy Ruff pointed out another play that continued life for the United States. Connor Hellebuyck stopped Devin Tao's shot with the paddle of his stick in the third period, keeping the puck from going into an otherwise open net. "You saw some unbelievable saves," said Ruff, who's from Warburg, Alberta. "Everyone saw an unbelievable game. Canada kind of took control in the second, but again, the goaltender could make a difference for you, and he held them in it. The paddle save he made just by reaching back was an incredible save. The last time the U.S. won an Olympic gold medal in hockey, none of the Sabres on the current roster were even born. Tuck was 13 years old when Canada defeated U.S. in the 2010 gold medal game in Vancouver.
Well, the Olympics are over, and after a last call, the door has closed on the Games. The Milan Cortina Olympics ended Sunday with a closing ceremony paying tribute to Italian dance and music inside the ancient Verona Arena, roughly mid-distance between the far-flung mountain, valley, and city venues that made these the most spread-out Winter Games in Olympic history. The Games ended as the twin flames in the co-host cities of Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo were extinguished during a closing ceremony inside the ancient Verona Arena, roughly mid-distance between the far-flung mountain, valley, and city venues. In declaring the 2026 Games over, International Olympic Committee President Kirsty Coventry told local organizers that they, quote, delivered a new kind of Winter Games and you set a new, very high standard for the future. The next Winter Games will be held in neighboring France, which received the Olympic flag in the official handover earlier in the ceremony. Following the same spread-out model, the 2030 Winter Games will stage events in the Alps and Nice on the Mediterranean Sea, while speed skating will be held in either Italy or the Netherlands. A total of 116 medal events were held in 8 Olympic sports across 16 disciplines, including the debut of ski mountaineering this year over the course of 17 days of competition. Host Italy won the highest Olympic tally ever with 30 medals, 10 gold, 6 silver, and 14 bronze, crushing the previous record of 20 set at the Lillehammer Olympics in 1994.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 32 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to our advice column asking Eric, and the headline is, Child's job struggles keep mom from finding happiness. Dear Eric, I live in an apartment with my 22-year-old daughter. She had a really bad high school experience that was broken up by COVID, so remote learning didn't go well either. She eventually got her diploma, but since then has not been able to find a job. We are going on about a year and a half now. She applies, but doesn't even get interviews. This is going to sound selfish, but I want to move away with my boyfriend of 7 years so that we can start living our life together. We do not currently live together. I know my daughter is an adult, but she is far from self-sufficient and makes no money to pay rent, the bills, or the groceries. I cannot kick her out into the streets. I don't have it in me to see her struggle like that. I can't take her with us because they wouldn't get along. I'm kind of at my wit's end here because I don't know how to change my situation so that I will be able to leave with my boyfriend and also make sure that my daughter can take care of herself. Please help me. And it's signed, Feeling Helpless. And Eric replies, Dear Feeling Helpless, pull your daughter into this conversation. Be honest with her about what your goals are and ask her what her goals are. And then work together to make a plan. It's been kind and loving of you to provide for her as she struggles with independence. But it'll be actually empowering for you to engage her, adult to adult. She's going to need those skills whether or not she gets a job. Maybe she needs training in a specific field or further education. Maybe she can cobble together some income from gig work. Maybe there are other relatives or friends that can assist with money or exchange for housing. I'm not saying this will be an easy process for her or for you, but something needs to change in her life. And you want something to change in your life. The first step is asking her, What do you plan to do, and how can I help? Our next letter. Dear Eric, I have a soft voice that has been criticized by many. I took a required speech class in college, and the instructor made up an emergency and asked if everyone would believe me if I told them about it. I overheard my principal tell a colleague, "It's a wonder she had any control over her elementary class with that voice." I am so tired of being talked over by others. Sometimes I have to start saying something 3 or 4 times before people listen. Sometimes I just give up. Sometimes I feel like I should act like a child, raise my hand, and wait to be called upon. Help! It's signed, Quiet as a Mouse. Eric replies, Dear Quiet, despite what your principal said, I'm presuming you do have control over your elementary school class. You've developed tactics that don't rely on your voice's volume. Give yourself credit for finding other ways to command attention, teach material, and maintain order. Perhaps there are ways of applying some of your classroom skills to other areas of your life. Also, look into a class or training with a vocal coach or an acting teacher. The voice is an instrument, and like any other instrument, loud isn't always the best setting. Consider a piccolo or a clarinet. When played correctly, they can be quite arresting without very much volume. Similarly, a teacher trained in the voice can work with your specific instrument, show you its features, your vocal cords, your diaphragm, your breathing, etc., and guide you in the ways of using it effectively without having to shout. Next letter. Dear Eric, my husband and I enjoy hosting dinner and cards with other couples. This is also reciprocated by a few other friends. I found it cringe-worthy due to the fact that they don't want to play a game that takes some thought. It's a game that just relies on the luck of the draw. I've tried to suggest fun, different games many times. Sometimes I'll demonstrate the game to try to create interest by explaining strategies that could be used. This is always met with disinterest. What can I do? Signed, Go Fish. And Eric replies, Dear Go Fish, when you're hosting, you might have to cut out the card games or excuse yourself. Or accept it. It's no knock on them that they're enjoying a relatively simple game. Perhaps their focus is on the camaraderie rather than the strategy. Game night can be a tricky endeavor. It's sometimes hard to find people that all align in their desire for gameplay and strategy. If you're enjoying their company otherwise, it's best to just accept that and that they're happy going fishing and join them in the pond.
Well, our next article is for those of us who have elderly family members, and the headline is A Careful Decision, What to Look For When Choosing a Nursing Home or Other Long-Term Health Facility. Sometimes it's a fall that brings a broken hip and a loss of mobility, or memory problems that bubble into danger, or the death of the partner who was relied upon for care. The need to move to a nursing home, assisted living facility, or another type of care setting often comes suddenly, setting off an abrupt, daunting search. It's likely something that no one ever wanted, but knowing what to look for and what to ask can make a big difference. Start with government ratings. Regulation of assisted living facilities varies greatly from state to state, meaning there's no centralized standards or source for information. If you're looking for a nursing home, though, they are monitored by the federal government. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services maintains records on nursing homes, including data on who owns the facility, how robust its staffing is, and what types of violations it might have been fined for. It assigns homes a star rating from 1 to 5. Sam Brooks, Director of Public Policy for the National Consumer Voice for Quality Long-Term Care, says that while the star rating can be notoriously unreliable, it can provide some clues about a home. 1 or 2 stars, expect it to be bad, Brooks said. Look past the lobby. When visiting a home on your list, Be careful not to be too swayed by the decorative touches that might be designed to lure you in, such as the lobby's furniture, dangling chandeliers, or vases of flowers. When I tour a building, I listen first. Is it loud? Are call bells ringing nonstop? Says Mark Sanchez, CEO of United Hebrew, a nursing home in New Rochelle, New York. After that, Sanchez says, switch your senses. Do you detect an odor? Do you see residents clustered around the nurse's station, perhaps clamoring for help? Are staffers speaking respectfully to residents? Are they making eye contact? Are they rushed? Culture shows up in small moments, Sanchez says, and it matters. Seeking input from families of current residents can be insightful. Another resource may be your local long-term care ombudsman. Ombudsman, funded by the Federal Older Americans Act and present in every state, investigate long-term care residents' complaints. Pay attention to how a place feels and pair that with concrete facts. When Jennifer Fink was making the, quote, stressful and grief-inducing, hard and scary decision on what memory care community was right for her mother, she didn't consult state databases or Google ratings. She went with her gut reaction, and luckily it was right. Staffing matters most, more than any other single thing. Experts on long-term care stress that a facility's staffing is most important. That means both the quality of the care you witness workers giving residents during your visit and the average staffing levels shown in the reported data. During a visit, ask staff how long they've worked there. A home that holds on to its workers for many years may offer your loved one more continuity. And keep a long-range view. When faced with an urgent decision, it can be difficult to focus on anything beyond the factors in front of you, but it's important to choose a home with a long-range view. At the start, many long-term care residents are able to pay for the cost of their bill, but what happens if their money runs out? If it's a nursing home that accepts Medicaid, how many beds are allocated to such residents, and would your loved one get that slot? If it's an assisted living facility, do they even accept people on Medicaid? Assisted living facilities often have complicated billing structures that require a bevy of questions to understand. Ask how costs may change as a person's needs increase. $4,000 a month can become $8,000 overnight, said Jeff Houston, founder of elder law practice Family First Firm in Winter Park, Florida.
And in the world of global trade, we have this headline: EU wants full clarity. And the subtitle is, Lawmaker decries pure tariff chaos after Supreme Court ruling. The European Union's executive arm requested full clarity from the United States and asked its trade partner to fulfill its commitment after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down some of President Donald Trump's most sweeping tariffs. Trump lashed out at the court decision and said on Sunday that he wants a global tariff of 15%, up from the 10% he announced a day earlier. The European Commission said the current situation is not conducive to delivering fair, balanced, and mutually beneficial transatlantic trade and investment, as agreed to by both sides and spelled out in a EU-US joint statement of August 2025. American and EU officials sealed a trade deal last year that imposes a 15% import tax on 70% of European goods exported to the United States. The European Commission handles trade for the 27 EU member countries. A top EU lawmaker said on Sunday that he will propose to the European Parliament negotiating team to put the ratifying process of the deal on pause. Pure tariff chaos on the part of the U.S. administration, Bernard Lang, the chair of Parliament's International Trade Committee, wrote on social media. No one can make sense of it anymore. Only open questions and growing uncertainty for the EU and other U.S. trading partners. The value of EU-US trade in goods and services amounted to $2 trillion in 2024, according to EU statistics agency Eurostat. A deal is a deal, the European Commission said. As the United States' largest trading partner, the EU expects the U.S. to honor its commitments set out in the joint statement, just as the EU stands by its commitments. EU products must continue to benefit from the most competitive treatment with no increases in tariffs beyond the clear and all-inclusive ceiling previously agreed. Jameson Greer, Trump's top trade negotiator, said in a CBS News interview on Sunday morning that the U.S. plans to stand by its trade deals and expects its partners to do the same. He said he talked to his European counterpart this weekend and hasn't heard anyone tell him the deal is off. The deals were not premised on whether or not the emergency tariff litigation would rise or fall, Greer said. I haven't heard anyone yet come to me and say the deal's off. They want to see how this plays out. Europe's biggest exports to the U.S. are pharmaceuticals, cars, aircraft, chemicals, medical instruments, wine, and spirits. Among the biggest U.S. exports to the bloc are professional and scientific services like payment systems and cloud infrastructure, oil and gas, pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, aerospace products, and cars. When applied unpredictably, tariffs are inherently disruptive, undermining confidence and stability across global markets, and creating further uncertainty across international supply chains, the Commission added.
Well, in Mideast news, officials plan to meet in Geneva, and top diplomat Arashi says a good chance for a diplomatic solution. The United States and Iran will hold their next round of nuclear talks Thursday in Geneva, a facilitator said on Sunday, as the Islamic Republic faces both the threat of a U.S. military strike and new protests at home. Oman's Foreign Minister Badr al-Disbati confirmed the talks. Oman previously hosted the indirect talks on the Islamic Republic's nuclear program and facilitated the latest round in Geneva last week. There was no immediate comment from the Trump administration, which has built up the largest U.S. military presence in the Middle East in decades as it pushes its longtime adversary for concessions on its nuclear program and more. Shortly before Oman's announcement, Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi told CBS in an interview that he expected to meet U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff on Thursday in Geneva and said a good chance remained for a diplomatic solution on the nuclear issue. Washington awaits a proposed deal that Araghchi said would be ready to share within days, and that the foreign minister told CBS that Iran was still working on the draft proposal. The nuclear issue, he added, is the only matter being discussed, even though both the United States and Israel also want to address Iran's missile program and its support for armed proxies in the Middle East. President Donald Trump warned Friday that limited strikes against Iran are possible, and both Iran and the U.S. have signaled they're prepared for war if the talks on Tehran's nuclear program fail. Minutes after Oman's confirmation of the talks, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian said on social media that the negotiations involved, quote, the exchange of practical proposals and yielded encouraging signals, but added that Tehran has, quote, made all necessary preparations for any potential scenario. The U.S. has said Iran cannot have nuclear weapons or the capacity to build them, and it cannot enrich uranium. Araghchi, however, told CBS that Iran has the right to enrich uranium. On Friday, he said his U.S. counterparts did not ask for zero enrichment as part of the latest round of talks, which is not what U.S. officials said publicly. He also said the talks focused on how to ensure that Iran's nuclear program, including enrichment, quote, will remain peaceful forever. He said that in return, Iran will implement confidence-building measures in exchange for relief on economic sanctions. Tehran has long insisted that any negotiation should focus only on its nuclear program and has refused to discuss wider U.S. and Israeli demands that it scale back its missile program and sever ties to armed groups. Although Iran insists that its nuclear program is peaceful, the U.S. and others suspect that it's aimed at eventually developing weapons. Iran says it hasn't been enriching uranium since U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in June.
TSA shuts down global entry as shutdown drags on. The Transportation Security Administration said on Sunday that the global entry program would be shut down as long as the partial government shutdown remains in effect. The announcement comes after the Department of Homeland Security said Saturday night that it planned to shut down both global entry and the Transportation Security Administration's PreCheck program, but DHS canceled the PreCheck closure. As staffing constraints arise, TSA will evaluate on a case-by-case basis and adjust operations accordingly, the agency said. The turmoil at security and customs lanes is tied to a partial government shutdown that began February 14th after Democrats in the White House were unable to reach a deal on legislation to fund the Department of Homeland Security. The security disruptions come at a time when a major winter storm will hit the East Coast from Sunday into Monday. 9 out of 10 flights going out of John F. Kennedy International Airport, LaGuardia Airport, and Boston Logan Airport have been canceled for today, Monday. Global Entry is a U.S. Customs and Border Protection program that allows pre-approved low-risk travelers to use expedited kiosks when entering the United States from abroad. There's no such government data on how much time passengers save at airports or other ports of entry from Global Entry, but travel industry experts estimate that Global Entry cuts the amount of time to go through customs from an average of 30 to 90 minutes for regular custom lines down to 5 to 10 minutes for Global Entry lines. And in some other news from Greenland, Greenland says no to hospital ship offer. U.S. President Donald Trump said he would deploy a hospital ship to Greenland, alleging that many people there are sick and not receiving care, even though both of the U.S. naval hospital ships are currently docked at a shipyard in Alabama. Trump's announcement prompted a defense on Sunday of Denmark and Greenland's healthcare system from their leaders, and it was the latest point of friction with the American leader, who has frequently talked about seizing the massive Arctic territory. It's a no thank you from here, said Greenlandic Prime Minister Jens Frederik Nielsen. Trump posted about a hospital ship came after Denmark's military said on Saturday it evacuated a crew member of a U.S. submarine off the coast of Greenland for urgent medical treatment. NASA moon rocket going back to the hangar. Grounded until at least April, NASA's giant moon rocket is headed back to the hangar this week for more repairs before astronauts climb aboard. The space agency said on Sunday it's targeting for Tuesday for the slow 4-mile trek across the Kennedy Space Center, which is dependent on the weather. NASA had barely finished a repeat fueling test on Thursday to ensure dangerous hydrogen fuel leaks were plugged when the rocket's helium system malfunctioned. In Afghanistan, Pakistan's military killed at least 70 militants in strikes along the border with Afghanistan early Sunday, targeting what it described as a hideout of Pakistani militants it blamed for recent attacks inside the country, the Deputy Interior Minister said. Kabul rejected the claim. Mike Huckabee started an uproar this week. An uproar continued Sunday after the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, said Israel has a right to much of the Middle East as more Arab and Muslim countries objected, and the U.S. said his comments were taken out of context.
Well, we'll wrap up with a quote for today, and this comes from a Jennifer Yane, who I have no idea who she is, but she said, "I try to take one day at a time, but sometimes several attack me at once."
Yay.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for February 23rd. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Pajak.
and I'm Ed Howard, and we thank you for listening.
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another